The rain pounded against the windshield of Daniel Reed's luxury sedan as he navigated the treacherous mountain road. Visibility was poor, the headlights barely cutting through the downpour. The wind howled through the ancient trees that lined the narrow path, their branches swaying like dancers in the storm. In the back seat, 6-year-old Lily curled beneath a blanket, her face flushed with fever. She whimpered softly, and Daniel's heart clenched. "Just a little longer, sweetheart," he murmured, though they both knew it wasn't true. The cabin retreat was still miles away, and the storm showed no signs of slowing. Without warning, the engine sputtered and died. The car rolled to a stop on the narrow shoulder. Daniel tried the ignition repeatedly, but the engine refused to turn over. He checked his phone. No signal. Outside, the storm raged on. "Perfect," he muttered, running a hand through his rain-dampened hair. "Just perfect." He stepped out into the rain, instantly soaked to the skin. "Stay inside, Lily," he called over his shoulder. "I'll see if I can flag someone down." But the road stretched empty in both directions. There were no houses, no lights, nothing but trees and rain and the growing fear in his chest. "Daddy," came Lily's small voice from the car. "I don't feel good." Daniel rushed back, adjusted her blanket. Her forehead burned against his palm. The fever was getting worse. "We need help," he said to the empty air. As if in answer, a light appeared through the trees. A steady glow approached through the curtain of rain. A figure emerged from the forest, a woman in a hooded raincoat carrying a lantern. "You shouldn't be out here," the woman said, her voice calm and direct. "Not with a sick child." Daniel instinctively moved to shield Lily. "Who are you?" "The only person within miles who can help you tonight," she replied simply. "I'm Serena. I live nearby." Daniel hesitated, but Lily's soft whimper made the decision for him. "I have shelter, warmth, medicine," Serena continued. "You can't stay here." He nodded, lifting Lily in his arms. Serena turned and led them into the forest. The path was narrow and slick with mud, winding between towering pines. After about 15 minutes, a soft light appeared ahead. A wooden cabin nestled among the trees, smoke curling from its chimney. Inside, warmth embraced them immediately. The cabin smelled of burning wood, herbs, and something sweet. Oil lamps cast a golden glow across handmade furniture and shelves lined with jars and books. "Lay her on the cot near the stove," Serena instructed, hanging her coat by the door. Daniel obeyed, settling Lily gently on the small bed. Serena knelt beside her, laying a cool hand on her forehead. "The fever's high," she said, moving to a wooden shelf. She returned with a small jar. "Elderflower and willow bark tea. It will help bring the fever down." Daniel stepped between them. "Wait, what is that?" "It's safe," Serena said, meeting his gaze. "Natural medicine. I've used it for years. You're not a doctor, and you won't find one up here tonight." He hesitated, then stepped back. Serena coaxed Lily to drink the tea, speaking in soft, gentle tones. Soon, the little girl drifted back to sleep. "You're lucky I heard your car," Serena said, placing the empty cup aside. "You live out here?" "Alone?" Daniel asked, looking around the small cabin. "Full time," she replied. "For nearly 7 years now. I'm Daniel. Daniel Reed." Serena nodded, but didn't offer her hand. "There's a towel and blanket in the corner. Get dry. Your daughter needs you to be strong." He looked down at himself, soaked through, mud to his knees. He moved to the corner, glancing back at Lily. "She's safe for now," Serena assured him. Daniel sank into a worn armchair, suddenly aware of his exhaustion. "I was trying to give her a break from the city. She's been anxious lately." Serena knelt to stir the fire. "This place is quiet." "Too quiet," he muttered. She smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what you hear when you finally stop running." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, unspoken but real. Outside, the storm continued, but inside the small cabin, they had found shelter from more than just the rain. Morning light filtered through the cabin windows, casting golden patterns across the wooden floor. Daniel woke with a stiff neck from sleeping in the armchair. For a moment, he was disoriented until the scent of cedar and herbs reminded him where he was. He sat up quickly. "Lily," still sleeping. Serena's voice came from across the room. Her fever broke during the night. Daniel turned to see his daughter resting peacefully on the cot, her breathing steady. A cool cloth rested on her forehead. Serena stood by the wood stove, stirring something in a clay pot. "That tea helped," she said without looking up. Elderflower, willow bark, wild mint. She sweated out most of the fever. That's not real medicine, Daniel frowned. Serena finally turned to him, her expression calm. It was real enough to help her sleep through the night. Daniel stood, running a hand through his hair. Look, I appreciate the shelter, but I need to get her to a clinic. She needs to be seen by a real doctor. Do you see a road outside? A signal tower? Serena asked. She's stable, better than when you carried her in. Trust that she's not in danger right now. You don't understand, Daniel said, his voice rising. I've spent her entire life trying to protect her. I can't afford to make mistakes. Serena walked past him to a wooden cupboard, pulling out 2 handmade bowls. Do you want to stay angry, or do you want breakfast? I want control, he muttered. Then you should have stayed in your city, Serena replied sharply. With your concrete and schedules. Daniel fell silent. Serena continued, her voice softer now. You design buildings, right? Places where people live. I preserve the wild so people can remember how to feel. I don't need a lecture. Neither do I. They stood in silence, 2 worlds colliding in the stillness of a forest morning. Finally, Serena returned to the stove and ladled porridge into the bowls. I built this cabin myself, she said. Everything I eat, I grow or trade. I don't need electricity to feel alive, and I don't need permission to trust the earth. Daniel looked around at the handcrafted furniture, the shelves of dried herbs, and the hand-carved tools. You live like this by choice. Serena smiled. Yes, not to escape the world, but to live in the part of it that still breathes. You're not afraid out here? Of storms or wildlife? No, she said, but I'm often afraid of people. That surprised him. Why? Because they see something different and want to change it. Daniel sat down near Lily, watching her peaceful sleep. I wasn't always a forest person, Serena admitted, handing him a bowl of porridge. I lived in the city once. I know what it's like to rush, to plan, to worry. That's why I left. What made you stay? He asked, accepting the bowl. Serena looked at him thoughtfully. One day, I realized I could hear myself think again. They both turned as Lily stirred on the cot. Serena knelt beside her, checking the cloth on her forehead. She'll be hungry soon, she said. The fever's nearly gone. Daniel knelt opposite her. I'm sorry I snapped, he said quietly. I'm not used to this. Serena looked at him with understanding. I know. He glanced around the cabin again. No Wi-Fi, no phone, no backup plan. It's like you live on trust. Exactly, she whispered. And you? You build skyscrapers, but your feet never touch the ground anymore. Daniel looked down at his shoes, still caked with yesterday's mud. You might be right, he admitted. Outside, the storm had passed. But inside, something more profound was beginning to shift. The foundations of a life built on control and schedules starting to crack under the weight of something unexpected and true. By the 3rd day, Daniel had given up on finding a signal. No cell service, no rescue trucks, nothing but wind in the trees and the occasional chatter of birds completely uninterested in his urban urgency. Lily, however, had adjusted with surprising speed. She was barefoot more often than not, her once pristine sneakers resting untouched by the door. Serena had made her a small cloth pouch, which Lily filled daily with treasures, smooth stones, feathers, unusual leaves, and anything else that caught her imagination. Daniel watched from the porch as Lily crouched near a mossy log, Serena beside her, showing her how to identify wild mushrooms and draw patterns in the soil. His daughter didn't even mention her tablet anymore. Each morning, he paced the clearing, trying again and again to reach his office, his assistant, his inbox. Every failed attempt left him more frustrated, more off balance. The only thing working here was time, and it refused to follow his schedule. That afternoon, as gray clouds gathered overhead, Daniel returned from checking the road, still blocked by fallen trees. He stepped into the cabin to find muddy footprints trailing across the wooden floor. Lily, he called, alarmed. She appeared from the kitchen area, cheeks flushed with excitement, hands and knees smeared with dirt. What happened to you? He demanded. I was helping Serena plant herbs in the garden, she beamed. She says I have a green thumb. This isn't a playground, Lily, Daniel said sharply. You get hurt out there. Her smile vanished. Serena appeared behind her, a faint line of soil across one cheek. She was fine, Daniel, she said calmly. She was with me the entire time. You should have told me, he said, exasperated. She's 6 years old. What if something happened? Serena folded her arms. You designed a community center with a nature-inspired playground so children could experience the outdoors safely. Yet you panic when your own daughter touches actual nature. That's different, he snapped. She's my responsibility. I respect that, Serena said evenly. But maybe she needs more than protection. Maybe she needs a connection. Daniel looked down, jaw tight. You think I don't care? No, Serena said gently. I think you care so much that you've forgotten how to let go. He said nothing. Serena walked past him to fetch a towel and handed it to Lily. Go clean up, little sparrow, she said softly. Lily nodded and disappeared down the hallway. Daniel sighed and rubbed his temples. I'm not trying to be the bad guy. You're not, Serena assured him. You're just a father who has spent too long trying to build a world that cannot break. Daniel sat down on the edge of the chair near the hearth. I used to think the more I designed, the more I could control buildings, spaces, even emotions. Serena crouched beside the fire, adding another log. And what happens when the world grows outside your designs? He looked at her, and she whispered, You let it grow. The fire crackled between them, each flame a question neither had asked yet. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Daniel stepped outside. The stars were brighter than he had seen in years. No light pollution, no traffic, just wind and crickets. Serena was already there, sitting on an old wooden swing hanging between two trees. Thank you, he said, joining her. For what? For letting my daughter touch the earth without asking permission. Serena smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight. She reminds me of someone, a girl I used to be before the noise. Daniel leaned back, gazing up at the star-filled sky. You never wanted to go back. I went back once, Serena admitted. I lasted 3 days. I couldn't breathe with concrete beneath my feet. He nodded slowly. And you? She asked. What would you design if no one told you what it had to be? He thought for a long moment. A place where Lily could run barefoot through grass without anyone telling her to stop. Serena chuckled. You might be closer to that than you think. In the silence that followed, something between them softened. The line between architect and forest woman, between control and freedom, began to blur. And in that moment, surrounded by trees older than memory, Daniel wondered if he had finally found a foundation worth building on, not with concrete, but with roots. The storm rolled in just after nightfall. Rain pounded the cabin roof like 1,000 tiny drums, and wind howled through the trees. Inside, the fire flickered low, and the single solar-powered light sputtered, then went dark. Daniel stood by the window, staring at the black screen of his phone. No signal, he muttered. No power. Perfect. Serena calmly lit a candle, then another, placing them along the mantel. The cabin was filled with soft golden light. It happens, she said simply, as if the storm was just another evening visitor. Lily stirred on the cot, uneasy in her sleep. Without hesitation, Serena lay beside her, curling her arm around the child's tiny body. She began to hum a soft, soothing melody, simple but tender, like a lullaby that belonged to the trees themselves. Daniel watched, unmoving. His daughter calmed almost instantly, nestling into Serena's embrace. Something tugged deep in his chest. He had never seen Lily so at peace, not even with him. Serena didn't speak, didn't ask for thanks. She just held her, as if she had always been meant to. When Lily finally drifted into deep sleep, Serena sat up and looked at Daniel. She's okay now, she whispered. He nodded, his throat tight. She walked over and handed him a candle. There are more in the kitchen if we need them. He took it, their fingers brushing briefly. The lightest of touches, but it sparked something unnamed between them. They sat by the fire as the storm continued outside. The candlelight danced between them, painting shadows on the wooden walls. You're different, Daniel said quietly. Most people would have called for help or told me to leave. Serena smiled, but there was a sadness behind it. Most people aren't trying to outrun themselves. He looked at her, surprised. She returned his gaze, calm and clear. You didn't bring your daughter up here just to escape noise. You brought her because something in you is tired of a life you've built. He exhaled slowly. I guess I thought if I could just design the perfect getaway, the stress would disappear. And it followed you anyway, she nodded. Daniel leaned back, staring at the ceiling. I spend my life designing spaces for others. Buildings, parks, homes, places for people to gather and feel alive. But sometimes, he paused, sometimes I forget how to feel alive myself. Serena looked down at her hands. I used to be a photographer. Nature, people, moments in between. I wanted to open a gallery. Bright space, high ceilings, natural light pouring in. What happened? Daniel asked gently. My father died when I was 24. Suddenly, unexpectedly. He was the only person who ever really understood me. Serena's voice was steady but soft. After he passed, I stopped taking pictures. I dropped everything, moved here. I thought if I surrounded myself with silence, I'd stop hurting. Did it work? He asked. She glanced toward the window, where lightning briefly illuminated the sky. No, but eventually the forest gave me something else. What's that? Presence. Pain didn't go away. But at least here, I could feel it without pretending I was okay. Daniel looked at her, really looked. In the gentle curve of her shoulders, in the quiet strength of her voice, he saw someone who had stopped running long before he ever started. You're brave, he said simply. Serena raised an eyebrow. For living without modern comforts? For choosing stillness, he replied. Silence fell between them again. But it wasn't heavy. It was warm, honest. The candle between them burned low. Daniel turned to her. I know how to create beautiful spaces, but I'm starting to wonder if I ever knew how to live in them. She didn't respond right away. Then, almost like an echo, she said, maybe it's time you built something new. He looked at her questioningly. Not a building, she added. Not a park, not even a cabin. She placed a hand gently over her heart. Maybe you need to start rebuilding here. Daniel swallowed hard. That's harder than drawing blueprints. Serena's voice was barely above a whisper. Then maybe stop drawing and just start feeling. Outside, the storm began to ease, the rain softening to a gentle patter. Inside, two people who had spent most of their lives trying to control the world around them sat quietly, no longer trying to escape, but beginning for the first time to stay. The morning sun rose behind thick layers of drifting cloud, casting a muted golden glow across the mountains as Daniel guided the car down the winding road. The engine hummed steadily, fixed at last, but there was no comfort in the smoothness. The forest, lush and ancient, faded further with each turn. In the rearview mirror, the treetops seemed to sway a final goodbye, as if asking him, pleading with him, not to leave. Neither he nor Lily said much during the drive. The silence wasn't tense. It was wistful. Lily hugged her stuffed fox to her chest, the small handmade toy Serena had sewn for her the night before. Its crooked smile and mismatched button eyes gave it more personality than all the expensive toys waiting for her at home. I wish we could stay longer, Lily finally said, her voice small. Daniel glanced at her, his chest tightening. I know, sweetie. Me too. But Serena hadn't asked them to stay. She had embraced Lily tightly, whispering something into her hair that Daniel couldn't hear. Then she turned to him, resting her hand briefly on his arm, a silent, steady touch, and said only, be safe. The road is long, but some paths find their way back. Now that road had led them to the city, and everything felt wrong. When Daniel opened the door to their apartment, the familiar chill of air conditioning swept over them. It used to feel like coming home. Now it felt sterile, over-sanitized, soulless. The gleaming floors, the sleek furniture, the minimalist decor, all pristine, untouched, unlived in. Lily didn't say a word. She slipped off her shoes, leaving small wet prints across the hardwood as she disappeared into her room. Daniel stood in the center of the living space, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the skyline he had once loved. The view used to inspire him. Now it made him feel like a stranger in someone else's life. Later that night, he tried to work. He opened his laptop and pulled up the resort blueprints. His latest project, a luxury retreat that would rise on a mountain not unlike the one they had just left. Sleek towers, infinity pools, private cabanas. It was supposed to be his masterpiece. But all Daniel saw was concrete cutting through roots, steel rising where wildflowers had once bloomed. He closed the laptop, sat in the silence, and for the first time, he wasn't proud of what he'd built. The days that followed only deepened Daniel's sense of disconnection. Everything in the city felt sharper, colder, louder. He heard the screech of brakes and the endless hum of elevators with new awareness, like someone who had lived in quiet and was now being shouted at. Lily had changed, too. Once inseparable from her tablet, she now refused screens altogether. She spent her afternoons drawing trees, rocks, wildflowers, and birds in flight. Serena's face appeared in her sketches more than once. Her braid, her hands in the garden, the way she knelt by the stream. Daniel tried to dive back into work, to force focus, but his creativity had vanished. His designs felt flat, soulless. He sat in meetings, nodding on autopilot, making decisions he didn't believe in, his mind drifting to stone paths and firelight. On the fourth evening, he found Lily on the balcony wrapped in a blanket. Her sketchbook was open in her lap, pages fluttering in the breeze. "I don't like it here anymore," she said, eyes on the skyline. "It smells like plastic. There are no crickets." Daniel sat beside her, the ache in his chest familiar now. "Do you miss Serena?" Lily nodded slowly. "And the firelight, and the stars." She paused, then added, "And how quiet it felt. But not the lonely kind of quiet, quiet the good kind." He followed her gaze to the shimmering lights of the city, stretching endlessly outward. "You know," he said softly, "I think I forgot how to breathe until we got there." Lily turned to him, her eyes honest and clear. "Then why are we here?" He had no answer. But that night, he stayed up long after Lily went to bed, standing in the dark kitchen, something shifting inside him. Not a whim, but a quiet clarity. The next morning, Daniel walked into the glass-paneled office of the resort development firm. He was greeted with handshakes, espresso, and eager smiles as they gathered around the conference table. Daniel opened his portfolio of blueprints, stared at the lines for a moment, and then closed it again. "I can't go forward with this project," he said. The room froze. "Excuse me?" one of the partners asked. "I'm withdrawing," Daniel repeated. "Effective immediately." "This is a multi-million-dollar contract," another voice protested. "What happened?" Daniel turned to the window, seeing reflections of suits and skyscrapers, but his mind was filled with trees. "I went to the site," he said. "I met the land and the people who live there. It's not just wilderness. It's not empty. It's full. And building over it would not be creation. It would be destruction. You'll be walking away from a lot." He nodded. "I'd rather lose a contract than lose myself." With that, he picked up his portfolio and walked out of the boardroom without looking back. Later that evening, as he and Lily packed their bags, she looked up at him and smiled. "Where are we going, Daddy?" Daniel zipped her bag shut and touched her hair gently. "We're going back to the place where we felt alive." She grinned, hugged her stuffed fox tighter, and whispered, "Back home." Daniel looked around the polished apartment one last time. For the first time in years, walking away felt like coming home. The forest was no longer just a refuge. It was home. Weeks after returning, Daniel and Lily settled into a rhythm that felt both unfamiliar and deeply natural. He had traded his downtown apartment for a small cabin not far from Serena's. It was modest, open to the trees, with wide windows and a roof he'd helped repair with his own hands. Lily began attending the local village school. She came home each day with leaves in her backpack and stories of nature walks, seed planting, and a boy named River who could identify bird calls by ear. Her laughter was louder now, freer. Daniel worked remotely most days. His firm had agreed to let him consult on sustainable projects, nature centers, eco-friendly housing, green spaces. For the first time, he designed places he believed in. And when his laptop closed on Fridays, he shed his city skin and returned fully to the forest. Serena had changed, too. She had transformed her old shed into an open-air photo studio and art space. Children from the village came to learn photography, to paint with natural pigments, to create with their hands. She called it wild light, and when she laughed during class, it sounded like sunshine through leaves. They never rushed to define what they were becoming. Daniel never pushed. But everything about how they lived spoke clearly. They were a family, not by declaration, but by choice, by presence, by the quiet rhythm they had found together. Every Saturday morning, they walked to the village market. Lily ran ahead with a basket, eager to help Serena choose berries and herbs. Daniel carried bread and honey, nodding at vendors who now called him the architect who stayed. One such morning, the square was especially lively, a harvest festival. Musicians played, children danced barefoot, and couples wove through stands of handmade crafts. Daniel reached for Serena's hand out of instinct, then hesitated. But Serena didn't pause. She took his hand firmly and laced her fingers with his. It was not casual. It was a choice. People turned. Some nodded. Some smiled. A few whispered, but Daniel only saw the curve of Serena's lips, the certainty in her eyes. "You sure?" he asked quietly. Serena looked at him, her voice soft but steady. "I'm not a leaf in the wind, Daniel. I choose where I grow, and I've chosen." Lily ran up, mouth full of honey bread. "Can we get apple cider, too?" Daniel laughed. "If you can carry it." Serena helped Lily adjust her basket. As the three of them walked through the market, hands full and hearts light, Daniel realized something profound. He had spent his life designing for permanence, stone, steel, foundations meant to last generations. But this bond between them, this family grown wild and honest, was the most rooted thing he had ever known. No concrete could hold a family together, but love, grown slow and intentional, that could hold through anything. The forest held its breath. Under the towering oak where their paths had first crossed, the same one that had once witnessed a broken-down car and a woman holding a lantern in the storm, now hung wildflower garlands and hand-woven ribbons. Wooden benches formed a circle in a natural clearing. The air smelled of pine, lavender, and wild roses. It was not a wedding from a magazine. No crystal glasses or silk drapes. But there was joy. There was music played on the guitar and hand drums by village friends. There were smiles and hands held, and children running barefoot through the grass. Serena wore a simple dress dyed with flowers and embroidered by village women. Her hair was loosely braided with lavender sprigs and tiny white blossoms. She had never imagined herself as a bride, not until now. Daniel stood across from her, wearing a light linen shirt, his eyes never leaving hers as the village elder spoke ancient words of blessing. Lily stood between them, holding a small wooden box. "Today," she said, her voice clear and confident, "I want to thank Serena for teaching me about wildflowers and bird songs and brave hearts. And I want to thank Dad for building us a home that has no walls." Daniel smiled, his throat tight with emotion. "I love you both," Lily continued, "and I hope this tree remembers our story forever." Serena knelt and hugged her close. "It already does, little sparrow." Daniel took Serena's hands in his. "You once told me I should rebuild from within," he said quietly. "I didn't know how then. But you, Serena, you became my blueprint, my North Star." Serena's eyes glistened. "I used to think I was just hiding," she whispered, "afraid of the world. But with you and Lily, I found my way back to it." The elder declared them husband and wife, and cheers erupted among the gathered friends. They kissed, surrounded by the scent of pine and the laughter of children. Later, as dusk fell, lanterns were hung from branches, casting a soft glow over tables of fresh bread, wild berries, and hearty stew. Lily performed a butterfly dance with other village children. Serena's students presented her with a large framed photograph of her cabin at sunrise, with wildflowers in the foreground. Daniel and Serena sat together on the old wooden swing beneath the oak tree, their fingers intertwined. "You know," he said, "none of this was in my 5-year plan." Serena leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "Good," she whispered. "The best things never are." A breeze rustled the leaves above them. In the quiet of twilight, surrounded by the people they had come to love, it felt like the entire forest sighed with contentment. "I once stayed because I was afraid to leave," Serena said softly. "Now I stay because it's where my heart has chosen to belong." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Then let's keep building," he murmured. "Not cities," she smiled. "No," he agreed. "Life. Right here." And beneath the branches that had once sheltered a lost man and his daughter, now echoed a promise. That family is not made by blood or blueprints, but by choosing each other, again and again, where the heart finds peace. If this story warmed your heart and reminded you that home is not always where we expect to find it, but often where our souls feel most at peace, then perhaps you've found exactly what you needed today. Sometimes the most unexpected detours lead us exactly where we're meant to be.